That on her experience, we should remember the last experience. Susan Rice tried, it seemed, to explain a violent event. She tried tackling a deadly terrorist attack on the U.S. Embassy in Benghazi. It didn't work out well because everyone soon knew she was lying. Joining us tonight, Congressman Jim Banks. Last summer, he told FBI Director Christopher Wray to label Antifa as a terrorist organization. Harmeet Dillon joining us, co-chair of Republican National Lawyers Association, member of the Trump 2020 Advisory Council, and she is also representing the journalist who was attacked by Antifa in Portland last summer. It's good to have you both with us, and let's first start with the idea, Congressman Banks, that finally it looks like you're going to get your way and Antifa will be called what it is, a terrorist organization.
Yeah, it's about time, Lou, but this president's serious about holding Antifa accountable for their actions. It was last summer when Andy Ngo got his face beat in by Antifa in Portland that I called on the FBI director, Chris Wray, to do something about it. To this point, he still hasn't, by the way, done anything about it. But if Chris Wray would have added Antifa as a domestic terrorist ideological group right next to other domestic terrorist groups, then at this point we would already be tracking them, we would be prosecuting them, we would be treating them like the terrorists that they are. Unfortunately, the lack of action by the FBI director has led us to where we are today, with the president taking necessary action to name Antifa as a terrorist group.
I said that the designation had already taken place, and I want to correct that. It will be taking place. The president has tweeted that he will do so, and the White House acknowledged they will be prosecuting whoever in Antifa is breaking the law as members of a terrorist organization. Harmeet, how complicated, how difficult will it be, or will it be simply a stroke of a pen for the president to designate Antifa a terrorist organization?
Well, Lou, thanks for asking and thanks for having me. Our law provides for designation officially of international terrorist organizations, and I think Antifa should be designated as such. But right away, the president can do something called putting together a joint task force. That's something that the DOJ already has a right to do. And they can immediately begin coordinating different agencies, Homeland Security, FBI, other surveillance and national security outfits, to then coordinate with local law enforcement as well. But the problem is the local law enforcement in these blue states don't want to prosecute Antifa. That's been the problem in Oregon and in Portland. That's been the problem in other big cities. And so it's really going to have to be the FBI doing it from scratch. And as Congressman Banks mentioned, they're a year behind. They could have been doing this already, but hopefully they can start now.
Congressman Banks, the president making this decision, and I want to read a statement from Attorney General William Barr, if you could put up that full screen, folks. He said this: federal law enforcement actions will be directed at apprehending and charging the violent radical agitators who have hijacked peaceful protests and are engaged in violations of federal law. The violence further goes on to say, the statement, the violence instigated and carried out by Antifa and other similar groups in connection with the rioting is domestic terrorism and will be treated accordingly. This brings us to the issue of who is hijacking these protests. Are they being hijacked or in fact being led? Are they being coordinated by, and by whom, if not radical anarchists? Because what is happening is very, very clearly a plan, because it's happening simultaneously, contemporaneously, in almost the same fashion in nearly all of these cities, which are, again, most of which are, the vast majority of which are democratically run.
No doubt about it, Lou. I had a black pastor in my district in Fort Wayne, Indiana, call me yesterday and said he went down to observe some of the protests, and it was very clear to him that there was a very strategic element behind the scenes that was coordinating much of it and deciding where the riot would go next. He was observing it and recognized that many of the leaders who were instigating it, the violent extremists that were instigating our particular riots locally, were not a part of our community. He saw that with his own eyes. But what you heard the president do today, Lou, when he spoke to the governors, I've never heard a president in my lifetime speak to politicians the way that he did, demanding that the governors and the mayors in this country rise up and show leadership to quiet these riots, to quiet it down, to show the type of leadership necessary to do it. If they're not going to do it, then the president is going to step in and do it by taking measures like what he described today.
And Harmeet, let's talk about what the president is doing. Because the citizens of these communities, some of them the nation's largest cities, are not demanding more of their local leaders. This is a matter of proximity in politics and power and responsibility. These are the people responsible for the violence on their street. Why in the world are they not demanding I mean, this mayor in Minneapolis is one of the most objectionable fellows I can imagine. Inexperienced, melodramatic, and lying. That is a dangerous cocktail of character in the Minneapolis mayor, do you not think?
Oh, completely, Lou. And I think what's going on here is a confluence of factors. And this, Susan Rice is completely out of touch and out to lunch. For many years, we've had these types of violent protests in American cities. They started with the Occupy Wall Street movement, which itself came out of European black bloc movements. And then we had Black Lives Matter, which was some legitimate concern over police brutality in certain cases that was then hijacked by malicious forces. And then today we have Antifa, which is building on all of that. Now, what happened in those earlier protest movements, Lou, is that the ACLU and other liberal groups sued all of these cities to punish them for arresting people and breaking up these protests, claiming those were First Amendment violations. And as a result, a lot of these cities have signed consent decrees where they will not go in and disturb protesters unless somebody's about to be killed. So we've seen the consequences of that. We're reaping that now, and Antifa now is organized. So what Congressman Banks was saying is absolutely correct. These guys have national leaders. They travel from state to state. They use telecommunications. They use social media to communicate. There's reports of bricks being delivered in an organized fashion to different riots in advance so that they could be used as weapons. And they're using these African-American communities and others for their troops. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, obscenely cynical and viciously destructive. Congressman